Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Ali and this is 5 ways to kill your chinchilla. Now this is not a training guide on how the best way to cause the death of your chinchilla. That'd be rather silly. So these are things that you should avoid doing, or just tips on how to not cause the untimely demise of your chinchilla. But before we get started, look at this little guy, how cute is he? One of the chinchillas we've had born last week. We've had quite a lot born actually in the last week or so. We've had about 9 chinchillas born. This is one of the little cuties. Number 5, plastic and toxic woods, especially in the cage. So having plastic in the cage is dangerous because chinchillas will chew on absolutely everything. And if a chinchilla chews on plastic and ingests some of it, it can become compacted and can cause blockages in their digestive system. Now if they get a blockage, it's a slow and painful death for that chinchilla. It will kill your chinchilla. Now it's the same for toxic woods. Chinchillas will chew on absolutely everything and they love to chew on wood, and if they ingest something that's toxic, obviously that is not going to be good for your chinchilla at all. It can lead to poisoning and death. So yeah, best to avoid those two things completely. Plastic in the cage, if you've got plastic ledges and plastic shelves, then the best thing to do is either remove them or cover them in fleece so your chinchilla cannot chew them. And for toxic woods, just don't use toxic woods at all. So things like redwood and cedar are a big no-no, just don't use them. Number 4, incorrect diet. Now this is a bit of a contentious one because in some parts of the world the diet is completely different for a chinchilla than say the UK or America. In some parts of the world it's perfectly acceptable to give your chinchilla fruits and veg, whereas in the UK and certainly in America that is something that is not what we do. It's something that we try to avoid at all costs. And the reason being is that fruit and veg aren't very good for your chinchilla. Now, is it going to cause your chinchillas to die if you give them one piece of fruit or one piece of vegetable? Of course not, but long term, over a period of time, it can actually shorten your chinchilla's lifespan quite considerably. The analogy I'm going to use is it's like smoking. We know that smoking can cause lung cancer, but some people can smoke their entire lives and not get lung cancer, and some people can get lung cancer. So you might have a chinchilla that's had fruit and veg its entire life and lived to a fine old age, but other chinchillas might not be so lucky. I'm bound to get people in my comment section saying I give my chinchilla fruit and veg every day and nothing's ever happened. It's the same as that with smoking. You know, you can smoke your entire life and live to the ripe old age of 90, or you could get lung cancer and possibly die from it. So yeah, that's the analogy I'm going to use, but basically you want to avoid anything with fresh fruit and fresh veg because they can cause digestive issues for your chinchilla. They can cause diarrhea and they can cause bloating. Now bloating, if it's serious, can actually lead to death. So you've got to be really, really careful with what you feed your chinchilla. And the best thing to feed your chinchilla is a good quality chinchilla pellet, fresh hay, and the occasional hay-based treat, or the occasional healthy treat for your chinchilla, like a Cheerio or shredded wheat or things like that, basically some oats. They're all healthy treats for your chinchilla, whereas fruit and veg, especially fresh fruit and veg, is no good for them, and seeds and nuts are no good for them either. So yeah, so if you want your chinchilla to live a long happy life, then I'd say look at what you're feeding your chinchilla and make sure that their diet is actually correct. Number 3, Not separating chinchillas that are fighting aggressively, like really aggressively. Some people don't like to separate their chinchillas when they're being aggressive towards each other because maybe they don't have another cage, they don't have the space for it, and so they decide to keep them together even though they are not getting along. Now this can result in a really serious situation. It can result in a chinchilla getting very injured, or it can result in actual death of one of your chinchillas, because chinchillas, if they aren't getting along, can get quite aggressive with each other, and if they do end up hurting each other, they can hurt each other quite seriously. And sometimes, yes, they can kill each other. So if your chinchillas are really not getting along, and you'll know because you'll see the chasing in the cage, you'll see fur flying all over the place, and I'm not talking about the odd little squabble here, I'm talking about proper full-on fighting, then you need to separate your chinchillas. There's no other option. You can't keep them together. And so many people do keep them together because they don't want to have two separate cages, which is no good for either of the chinchillas involved. Number 2. Now I've put these two together, and this is accidents outside the cage and also interactions with other pets. So first of all, accidents outside the cage. So this could be things like chinchillas falling from a high distance, which can happen from time to time because they are quite clumsy. They can also run into things, they can run into doors, on walls and all kinds of stuff. And also things like if you have them out on the floor, there's a chance you could accidentally step on them. All kinds of things can happen when they're outside their cage, which is why you have to keep a safe environment as possible. I would recommend a small room or a playpen is the safest way to have your chinchilla out for playtime. Also, you've got to be careful when you're opening the cage door for your chinchilla, because I have several chinchillas that will just leap out without even looking, and they can actually do themselves some real damage, especially if it's from the top level of the cage. They can actually, cause themselves quite a bit of injury should they fall from that, but sometimes they do just leap out. So just be careful when you're opening the cages, making sure that your chinchillas don't just full on leap at you and leap out of the cage, because they can actually fall and hurt themselves. Now, mixed in with this is the interaction between cats and dogs and other animals as well, such as rabbits. This can be extremely dangerous. Now, predator and prey animals, I personally think, should not interact at all. I think that they should be kept separate. No matter how well trained your dog is, no matter how calm they are around other animals, dogs and cats still do have a predator drive, and only takes 1 second for there to become an accident with a dog and a cat and a chinchilla. Obviously, you can judge best on your own animals, so you know your dogs and your cats best, and you know your chinchillas best. Me personally, I would not let my chinchilla out around other predators, so cats and dogs. I just wouldn't let them interact at all, no matter how well you think you know your animals. I personally would keep that completely separate. Things like rabbits, although rabbits won't actually attack your chinchilla at all, they do actually carry a bacteria that is quite harmful for chinchillas. Not harmful for a rabbit really necessarily, but if a chinchilla gets it, it's quite dangerous for them and can lead to death of your chinchilla, so you've got to be careful around rabbits and chinchillas. And number 1, the top killer of chinchillas: heat. Who's surprised by that? The top thing that kills chinchillas year on year, especially in the UK, is heat. Because in the UK we don't have aircon in our houses as standard, unless you've got a new build that's fancy. So unfortunately, quite a lot of the time in the UK, chinchillas suffer heat stroke in the summertime. In the summertime, we always get reports of chinchillas that have passed away through heat stroke. Now, me personally, I have several portable aircon units, so I have aircon in my house. Yes, they're portable ones which aren't as good as, you know, full-on aircon, but they do the job they need to do. But unfortunately, some people don't want to invest in that, and if you don't invest in it, then you have the potential risk of heat stroke, especially if we're going to have summers like we had last year. The hottest day of the year last year was the hottest ever recorded in the UK. So yeah, during those days, I had so many reports of people saying that their chinchillas had passed away, and it's really sad, and it's something that can be easily avoided if you buy an aircon unit. So yeah, heat is so dangerous for a chinchilla, and is one of the top killers of a chinchilla that can be prevented. So in terms of preventable deaths of chinchillas, I would say heat is top. I would say it's the biggest threat to a chinchilla because they just cannot cope with the heat and will suffer heat stroke and will die. If you want to have a chinchilla, please invest in a portable aircon units if you're from the UK, and if you don't have aircon, please invest in it, because heat is a real problem, and it really does cause a lot of deaths in chinchillas. So yeah, I hope you found this video interesting and informative, and I will see you in another one soon. Goodbye for now.